Syracuse's wide receiver room got more certainty with Justus Ross-Simmons back in the fold.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. That is Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. On today's show, we will discuss the wide receiver room and its potential later on in the show. Plus, there are a couple of wide receivers emerging from Syracuse's depth chart. Stick around later on for that. But first and foremost, the big move that happened a few days ago, Justus Ross-Simmons returning to Syracuse football and the impact he has on this wide receiver room and this team in general. All that and more coming up here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. So, Neil, thank you so much for taking the time here on Monday afternoon, August 17th. We are less than 3 weeks away from Syracuse's season opener. And last week, I would have told you that, hey, Syracuse and its wide receiver room, they're not going to have a guy by the name of Justus Ross-Simmons suiting up. And Fran Brown would have told you the same thing because he didn't want anyone coming back, or at least that's what he said. But, Neil, maybe Fran Brown changed his mind. Who knows? Who really cares? But Justus Ross-Simmons, as we discussed over the weekend, returned to Syracuse football. So, Neil, what was your reaction to seeing the news that JRS is back with the team?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it. As always, friends, make sure you're subscribing out there to Jackson's Fab Pod. I was pleasantly surprised because, like you said, Fran Brown mentioned in his press conference the day before preseason camp started that he wasn't planning to add any players that might be getting a fifth season because of the federal injunction issued in Colorado at the end of July. Was he lying? I don't know. I mean, maybe that was, a couple of weeks ago. Who knows? Things change. It's a fluid situation. Obviously, you're covering that in terms of a Monroe and the basketball team. So I don't know. My reaction is, oh, snap, cool. Because as we've talked about, and I know you've talked about with other folks as well, this wide receivers room has on paper, and we love to talk about on paper, has loads of depth. But in terms of proven production, there are some guys. Now, some of them obviously came from other schools, so they don't necessarily have proven production either A, at Syracuse, or B, in the ACC / in a power conference. But who the guys are going to be, we don't know yet. And like you said, we're coming into, a couple weeks to go until the season starts, which is crazy. So he assuming everything's good to go. And obviously we're going to be waiting word later this week, probably, about the NCAA's appeal on this whole issue. And it's not just JRS, but he would be the highest returning production, 20 catches, 312 yards, 5 touchdowns, which tied for the team lead last year. The only 3 guys ahead of him, Cook and Gill, who are both at Ole Miss, and Villari, who's obviously, at the next level. So he's another experienced veteran wide receiver. He's played 2 years at Syracuse, before that 2 years at Colorado State. His time at Syracuse in both seasons has been limited due to injury, but why not? Now, I guess my only, and I'll throw it back to you, brother, is like when you bring a guy in this late in the, with preseason camp already been going on for 2 weeks, like does that, I don't think it really messes with chemistry and stuff because he was on the team last year. If it's a guy coming, from somewhere else, maybe that, and he's a guy that's expected to start or get a lot of minutes, maybe that there's a wrinkle added in there. And obviously in Monroe's case on the basketball side, they haven't started preseason practice. So basketball is different. But no, I mean, again, with Calvin Russell being out, and look, there's going to be a bunch of guys that are sophomores that are going to probably, step up, and then again, transfers, and then incoming freshmen. We'll see about those guys. But no, I think it's a net positive, assuming he's healthy, assuming he can produce. Yeah, have a guy like him, have a guy like Amari Hatcher kind of leading the way in terms of veterans who have been at SU in the past. Sure, I'll take it.
Yeah, with Justus Ross-Simmons, I completely understand your point about team chemistry and welcoming back in mid-August when the season starts on September 5th. I think we can all agree that that is a legitimate I don't know if concern is the right word,
It's
but
something
more
to
of
monitor. Like,
it's something to monitor. That's probably the best way to put it. It's something to monitor. How quickly up to speed is Justus Ross-Simmons going to be with the Syracuse offense?
Right.
But he is a little bit different than, say, if Fran Brown had gone out there and gotten another wide receiver from the transfer portal. Justus Ross-Simmons was with the team last year. He was also with the team in 2024. So he understands what offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon is trying to do. He completely understands it. And Syracuse's starting quarterback, Steve Angeli, well, he was the starting quarterback for the first 4 games of last year when Justus was playing. So you'd figure that they have some sort of chemistry together. I mean, they know each other. They have said hello before, obviously.
Right.
So while it is definitely something to monitor, I am hopeful that this is going to work out.
Right.
Where Justus Ross-Simmons is going to get up to speed and he's going to have chemistry. My issue with him, not really my issue, my worry with him is the injury bug. I mean, you could say the same thing about any player, but if you look at Justus Ross-Simmons' track record, the last couple of years, he's dealt with a lot of injuries at Syracuse. It's why in 2024, he was usurped on the depth chart. It's because he went into the year hurt. Last year, he got hurt multiple times. That kind of impact, or that limited his impact last season. But overall, in totality, when you look at the pros and the cons of adding back Justus Ross-Simmons, I think the pros far outweigh the cons, especially when, like you mentioned, I mean, this wide receiver room, it needed more proven production. And while Justus Ross-Simmons has not proven to be a number 1 wide receiver by any stretch of the imagination, he's the highest returning wide receiver from last year in terms of receiving yards. I mean, he had over 300 yards in 8 games last year. Had 20-something catches, he had 5 touchdowns, which is pretty impressive. And we have to figure those numbers would go up with a healthy Steve Angeli for a whole season. So overall, Neil, I think the pros outweigh the cons, and I am ultimately happy that JRS is back in the fold. And I'm happy that Fran Brown was either not telling the truth or he decided to, you know what, I'm going to change my mind about adding another player to this team. Let's get Justus Ross-Simmons in the fold.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I guess I could Google it. I don't know if it was Syracuse.com or one of the other media outlets up in Syracuse. I feel like talked to JRS and at some point, like earlier on, maybe this summer, or I don't know if it was, saying that he wanted to, or he was considering a return to college. I don't remember if the article said he was considering a return to Syracuse or not, but yeah, I agree with you. I think the barrier to entry in terms of him having a smooth transition is a lot less significant because he's played on the team in the past. He's played with Steve Angeli in the past. He knows Fran Brown. He knows Jeff Nixon. Now, my only thing, and I'll just throw this back to you, and this isn't me being negative because you know me, I'm not a negative person, but do other wide receivers in that room that are contending for minutes, do they saw this on Friday and they're like, oh man, really? Or are they all like, heck yeah? Like, probably most of them were like, heck yeah, but maybe in the back of their minds or any of them
I'll give you an honest answer to that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't care. I don't care.
No, I just put it out there.
That's not my problem. That's not your problem.
Of course, it's not either our problem.
That's that. Fran Brown's job is to win football games.
Absolutely.
So Fran Brown is going to do what it takes to win said football games. He's going to bring in who he believes is going to help his team achieve the ultimate goal, which is to win more football games than anyone else. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to win more games than anyone else in the nation. Spoiler alert, they're not. Point being is that Fran Brown saw an opportunity to improve his roster.
Just like McNamara with Monroe.
That's what McNamara did. And so, oh no, too bad if one of the wide receivers is now all of a sudden not happy. I mean, too bad. I mean, it's August 17th, and at the end of the day, Neil, it's all going to take care of itself. If you're really, truly that good,
then you'll get more time than him anyway. Yeah.
You'll play.
Yeah.
If you can play, you'll play. That's
I don't care one way or another. I'm always kind of curious, especially with these things going on in the legal, what those dynamics are in the locker room and how these class of 2022 athletes in any sport, assuming that the injunction holds or if they're involved in state cases, whatever, like JJ Starling. But like what does that impact locker rooms negatively, or is it a net I'm always kind of fascinated.
I don't think it, I mean, especially with
just because it's for football, just because they're in preseason camp. At basketball, like whatever, they haven't even started preseason. I'm just saying, like they're 2.5 weeks out,
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, you'll see this in college, you'll see this in the pros where
absolutely
teams will add people that are in trouble with the law.
If you're meant to play, then you'll play.
Like they'll add people that are in trouble beyond your football. They'll add suspended players. They're trying to win games.
Yep.
So at the end, and I hope everyone understands that on Syracuse's roster.
I think they do. And it's not really a Syracuse question. It's more of just a general, I'm curious, what this is doing right now to, locker rooms in terms of Division I FBS football teams, if they're adding guys, this late in the game, and kind of how it's being received. But I don't care.
They just gotta if
it helps, if JRS helps them win games, cool.
That's how we have to look at it.
Yeah,
in terms of how the locker room is looking at it. Look, at the end of I understand if you're a wide receiver in that room and you are upset by them adding Justus Ross-Simmons, if he's going to take playing time from you, I understand that from a human standpoint.
Right.
At the same time, if you do your job and you do your job well, you're going to play. And when you get the opportunity to play, you better perform.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you are able to produce, you're going to play.
Right.
And Justus Ross-Simmons, we like Justus Ross-Simmons. That's a good addition. He's probably going to start for Syracuse football.
He ain't
Jerry Rice. Okay? He's not Jerry Rice. This is not Jeremiah Smith. This is not adding, the best receiver in college football. And now you're completely Marvin Harrison. You are not completely screwed out of Syracuse's wide receiver room. He's just currently probably the best player in the unit right now. That doesn't mean that over the course of the season that will continue. Absolutely. Having said that, I think we can both agree that regardless, it is a good move, and Fran Brown is trying to win games. Now, speaking of other wide receivers on the depth chart, we got word from camp that there are a couple of wide receivers that are starting to separate themselves, and that's a good sign for Syracuse football. So we'll talk about it next on Locked On Syracuse. If you've got a sweet tooth like I do, and we all kind of have a little sweet tooth, right? You know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why Cotton Candy 5-Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. This is what classic cotton candy tastes you remember, but with a tasty caffeine boost and zero sugar. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. It's become my go-to when I want something sweet without being, without going overboard. Bring on the sweetness with Cotton Candy 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Locked On Syracuse, I'm Jackson Holzer. That is Neil Adler from inside the Loud House. Justus Ross-Simmons, we figure, is going to be a starting wide receiver for Syracuse football, but we can all agree this team needs more. They need more than just Justus Ross-Simmons to be an elite wide receiver room, and we love Calvin Russell, but Calvin Russell is still injured, and hopefully he can return at some point, but for now, he is not ready to return. So that means Syracuse needs some guys to emerge. And from fall camp, we are getting word that there are a couple of wide receivers emerging from Mike McAllister, publisher for Syracuse over on 24/7 Sports. And those wide receivers are Darius Johnson and Zamondre Merriweather. Both these guys are having good camps. Darius Johnson mentioned could be a starting slot wide receiver for Syracuse football. Zamondre Merriweather, he looks good. His playing time may be impacted with Justus Ross-Simmons, but hey, who knows? Maybe he's carved himself out a role as well. So, Neil, overall, what do you make of these two wide receivers emerging for the Orange in fall camp?
Well, I saw Mike's piece, and obviously he knows his stuff. But to be honest, Josh Gaddis, the wide receivers coach, talked about numerous guys last week. I don't remember which day it was, but he had media availability, and he definitely mentioned Merriweather, the transfer. Darius Johnson, he mentioned Amari Hatcher, Cole Weaver, Matt Alton, Tyshawn Russell, Elijah Moore. I think he also mentioned Julian McFadden, which I believe Mike also mentioned in his piece today. Again, it's kind of hard to know how it's going to look on the two deep right now, but there's a lot of guys in contention. Yeah, I'd say Merriweather and Johnson are definitely in there. I'd say, I don't remember if Gaddis mentioned Darian Williams, the CBA guy, the local guy, but him as well. I mean, I like, a lot of people have talked about Cole Weaver from Miami, Ohio. I'm totally blanking. Where did Merriweather come from? Was he a junior college guy?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then Cole Weaver, and then Matt Outen, who Gaddis talked about, but then also Jeff Nixon talked about in terms of, they recruited him when he was a prep recruit and he went to Penn State, and his versatility. He's a wide receiver, but he can play running back and return kicks and all that, or return punts. I don't remember which one it was, or maybe it's both. But yeah, I think Merriweather and Johnson. I like Johnson last year. What was his? He didn't have a ton of stats.
6 catches for 48 yards last year.
Williams had 8 catches, 101, 1 touchdown. Tyshawn Russell. I mean, there's a ton of guys. It's just, again, there's so much depth, and Gaddis mentioned that last week. I still don't know if like 2, 3, or 4 guys are like head and shoulders above the rest, but the guys Mike mentioned, I definitely keep an eye on. Merriweather, Boobie Johnson, and did he mention McFadden too? But again, those other guys I mentioned, absolutely. I don't know in terms of freshmen though, like Amari Goff, and then some of those guys from Delaware. Was it BJ Garrett, and then Phoenix Henriquez? I hope I'm not butchering his last name. We'll see if those guys see this. And then you've got Demetrius Samuel Jr.
I don't think he's going to play much. I'm still not buying it.
And I feel like we talked about that recently. So the thing is there's so many guys, and I still think we need a little bit more time to see who is going to separate themselves. But like, I could see JRS getting time, Russell, Merriweather, list goes on and on and on. And then, yeah, we don't even have Calvin Russell. So, the guys that Mike's mentioned, I would definitely keep my eyes on, but there's others as well. And we'll just kind of see how it all shakes out. But Angeli is going to have a ton of dudes to throw to. And let me make sure I have my notes right. So Gaddis said last week that normally in like the first week, he's looking to play 4 or 5 guys. He said, of course, now I can't find it. I think he said 8 or 9. 8 or 9. Now, obviously, that could change.
Makes sense. I mean, their first game is against an FCS opponent, so
true. But again, he was just praising the depth, and so I like the depth. I will say though, again, not being negative, but depth is great, but you still need like proven dudes at the top to be like producing. Like, we can't just have like 10 dudes that like have a couple catches here. Like, you need the guys, but then having depth is great too. So yeah.
No, absolutely. You're right about that. And a couple of things. Number one, with Darius Johnson, if he truly is the starting slot receiver for Syracuse football, I mean, that's a dude that's in line for a breakout season, because Agreed. If you're the starting slot wide receiver in the Jeff Nixon offense with Steve Angeli throwing it at football, I mean, the name that pops to mind is Trevor Pena and how he broke out in 2024. I'm not saying Darius Johnson's now going to be second team All ACC or whatever Pena was that season, but that's the type of upside that he could have being in that role as the starting slot wide receiver with a competent quarterback and an offensive coordinator like Jeff Nixon. He could really produce some big numbers. But I do have a fear when it comes to Justus Ross-Simmons. It's not him himself. It's why did Fran Brown decide to add him? Like, obviously it makes Syracuse better. We can all agree it makes Syracuse a better football team.
But did he do that because doesn't think guys are he doesn't like where the room is? Is that
exactly my fear. If you remember last year, Fran Brown tried to say to publicly that he added Steve Angeli because he wanted another veteran quarterback in the room, and it had nothing really to do with Ricky Collins not being any good. And throughout fall camp, he was saying how they're neck and neck and how Ricky Collins is here first, so he's he might have the upper hand. And then Steve Angeli was given the starting job, and we're all out here being like, well, Ricky Collins, he's right on his heels. If Steve Angeli starts to struggle or anything like that, Ricky Collins is right there. And then, well, we found out what it was like watching Ricky Collins, and he was not very good at all. And so we really figured out what the truth was. He added Steve Angeli because Ricky Collins was not any good. And so in the case of Justus Ross-Simmons, I guess my big fear in the move is not him himself, but that Fran Brown is doing it because he's watching these practices, he's watching this offense, and he's saying, this wide receiver room, it really needs something. There's just not a lot of guys that are really separating themselves. So we need another guy in the mix like Justus Ross-Simmons, because a couple of weeks ago, he literally told everyone, hey, we're not really looking to add anyone. Now all of a sudden he decides to add. That is my fear with Justus Ross-Simmons. That is my negative Nancy take on everything going on right now.
I get it. I guess my only thing is I feel like the JRS edition this late, there's a little bit of a asterisk or caveat next to it in terms of, look, we don't know how long Justus Ross-Simmons might have been talking with Fran Brown and other coaches about potentially returning. Or maybe initially he said, nah, I'm not coming back. Or if I come back, I'm not coming back here. Or maybe he changed his mind. That is JRS. The other thing is obviously with the whole legal process, it's still not a guarantee that 2022 athletes, whether in football, basketball, or any other sport, I think the likelihood is that the NCAA is going to lose, but I have talked to a couple legal experts about Mario Monroe, not about JRS, that have said, look, the NCAA will probably lose its appeal this week, but the federal injunction might not hold all season. So guys should attach themselves to state cases or whatever. And if they're not, it's possible that they could play part of the year and then get yanked out. I don't think that's likely, but so, maybe the information that JRS and his camp are receiving and or the information that Fran Brown and the Syracuse staff are receiving is that, okay, things look pretty good and we'll welcome you back if you want to come back. And maybe the mood, the sentiment among either the player or the staff could have been a little bit different a few weeks ago. Or maybe Fran Brown wasn't completely truthful or told a little white lie because he didn't know, or it's just a delicate situation and it's a legal situation and we just don't know. So if it was under ordinary circumstances and some dude was just added late, just to be added late in the game, but it had nothing to do with legal stuff and injunction, then I'd be like, all right, well, is that, maybe I'd feel a little bit more like the wide receiver room isn't potentially up to snuff. But with all this stuff, and I don't know all the context, I talk to people, but I don't know everything. So who knows? But it's a fair point, Jackson. It's a fair point to say, okay, well, they're bringing back Justus Ross-Simmons and he has a ton of veteran experience. Yes, he's been injured, but are they bringing him back now because they're not feeling the rest of the room? Not that they don't like some of their receivers. So it's a fair assessment. It's fair.
It's just a little
something to keep in mind.
After the initial positivity of, oh, this is a good move. I like it.
You think about it, you kind of let it set in. Yep.
It's the same fear of why they brought Steve Angeli in last year when they already had Ricky Collins. I remember at that time before Steve Angeli, when they were talking about maybe other quarterbacks, and I was like, okay, are they going to get a guy that's capable of starting like a Steve Angeli? Or are they just going to bring in someone who we would look at and say is a clear backup player? I think the example that they were looking at one point was it Zach Gibson? He was coming over from Georgia State, and he might have visited Syracuse.
I don't even remember last year.
And I was saying, well, if Syracuse brings in this guy, he ain't playing over Ricky Collins, that's for sure. But when they brought in Steve Angeli,
that's a different one, man.
That's different.
That's Notre Dame.
That's a guy who was competing for Notre Dame's starting quarterback, and you're gonna. I guess you're going to have a real competition with him. Okay, fine, Fran Brown. And then, we learned that, nope, it was not about a competition. It was Steve Angeli is here because we've seen Ricky Collins enough. We know he's not very good. We need Angeli. So that is my fear with Justus Ross-Simmons. They watched this wide receiver room. Calvin Russell obviously got injured in the spring, and they're saying to themselves, this is not necessarily a luxury. This is a necessity. We need Justus Ross-Simmons back. And I think that there's a difference between adding a luxury versus adding a necessity. And hopefully enough guys emerge from the wide receiver room where we can sit and say, you know what? Hindsight, the wide receiver room was fine. Justus Ross-Simmons was just more depth for the unit, right?
The cherry on top of the sundae, the icing on the cake,
that's what it was. That's the upside move.
Sure.
Of it. So
sure.
Speaking of which, we'll talk about the potential of the wide receiver room. That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. And best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with everyday's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. And when you're monitoring games and you're trying to decide who you think is going to hit a home run, I mean, some of the factors you look at, right? Is a hitter on a hot streak? Is it a favorable pitching matchup? Or is it simply a ballpark that tends to give up a lot of home runs like Coors Field in Colorado? Those are always some of the things I look at before making my daily dingers pick. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Diggers and make your free pick on who is hitting a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. Jackson Holzer, Locked on Syracuse. That's Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. Let's talk about the potential for this wide receiver room now with Justus Ross-Simmons back in the fold. What I would say about it is, it definitely increases the floor. The floor is definitely higher when you have a guy like Justus Ross-Simmons back in the mix. And also there's a little bit of upside attached because I do think that with Justus Ross-Simmons, if he can stay healthy, he can put up career high numbers, especially Syracuse career high numbers. I think his career high overall is about 700 yards. I don't know if he'll hit that even if he stays healthy a whole season, but he definitely makes the wide receiver room better. But obviously, they're going to need more. We talked about Darius Johnson maybe emerging as the starting slot. Zamondre Merriweather is turning some heads in fall camp as well. Calvin Russell, he's injured, but who knows? Maybe he can return at some point in the year. And he's coming off a torn Achilles, so you never really know. But, hey, optimistic. He returns, and he's great upon impact, upon his return, right? So, Neil, what do you think the ceiling is for this wide receiver room? I asked the tough questions here on Locked on Syracuse.
Well, it's dude, you're great. What's the ceiling? I think the wide receiver room can be good, assuming that dudes that we've just talked about, some of them step up, maybe some more than others. Steve Angeli does what he did last year through the first 3.5 games and doesn't get injured, knock on wood. And the offensive line is solid and the run game is solid. So there's balance. I mean, I know, Jeff Nixon style offense, he's going to have Angeli sling it a lot like, he was last year and like Kyle McCord did in 2024. But I really want an offense that's more balanced. I really do. And that doesn't mean that Angeli can't throw it a bunch and be really good and be all ACC caliber and potentially lead the ACC in passing yards and touchdowns or, be up there. But I also don't want him throwing the ball like 75 times a game. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but just I want balance. But in terms of the wide receiver room, I think there are nice pieces. It's just how's it all going to shake out? Again, I've always, and I know they didn't play a lot last year, but Darian Williams and Darius Booby Johnson, I was really high on last year. Let's see what Tyshawn Russell can do. Then you've obviously got two veterans and Amari Hatcher and Justus Ross-Simmons. And then you've got a bunch of transfers. Like you said, Merriweather and Weaver. Are there other transfer wide receivers that I'm blanking on right now? Are those the two main ones?
Potentially. I mean, there's so many wide receivers.
I know. I can't keep track of
the guys.
Right. But I mean, I think I hit, the main dudes. And like part of me is like thinking, and I feel like you and I talked about this once before, is it like a good thing if ultimately they have like 8 or 10 wide receivers that all have like 20, 30, something, whatever catches, like a decent amount and like 400 to 600 yards, but no guys with 1,000. I mean, I guess it's, it's the totality that matters more than if we have a 1,000-yard receiver or whatever. But I mean, look, I think it'd be better to have a handful of dudes that are really like up here and are getting more targets than the others. But then if the guys that are on the, the backside of the two deep are still capable and coming in, and if there's injuries or whatever, like the depth can be a good thing as long as there are some guys who are the go-to guys who can produce.
I think ultimately the ceiling is top 5 in the ACC as a wide receiver.
Okay.
room.
If you're asking that, okay, sure.
But
okay, yeah.
But as a floor, Justus Ross-Simmons elevates the floor, but that doesn't mean the floor of this wide receiver room is strong. I would say it also could be a bottom 5 unit in the ACC, just because even with Justus Ross-Simmons, you still don't have a lot of proven production in that wide receiver room. The good news is that they have a good offensive coordinator in theory with Jeff Nixon. We saw what he did in 2024 in the beginning of 2025. And you have a good quarterback in theory with Steve Angeli starting the first 4 games last year.
That's a good foundation
at a high level. It's a great foundation. Having the quarterback and the OC, you need those tools in order to have a successful wide receiver room. You can have the best wide receiver room in the country, but I can assure you,
throw it to him.
Collins throwing you the football, you're not going to be very good.
Right.
It's just how it is.
Yeah, sure. Get it. I get it.
So it's volatile. It's one of those units that can go either way. I think that there are some on Syracuse where it can be upper echelon, right? Like the cornerback room for Syracuse could be one of the best units in the ACC. Linebackers could be pretty strong. That's a little more volatile as well. But those are some units maybe with a little bit more certainty. Wide receiver room has that boom potential where it could be a top 5, maybe even top 3 unit in the conference, but also it could be bottom 5 in the conference because they have depth, but they don't have the elite. They don't even have the average to above average guys at the very top. That's why the games are played, and so we'll ultimately see how it all shakes out. That's Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House and Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. Neil, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Can we start playing already?
I wish. I would. If it were up to me, the first.
I'm ready, brother.
Tonight, it would be on August 17th. This episode's premiering at 6 p.m. Eastern. So 7 o'clock, Syracuse football plays their first game of the season. But no, Neil, unfortunately, I do not have power. But the NCAA doesn't have power either. So join the club. NCAA, Neil, myself, we don't have any power over anybody anymore. But Neil, thank you so much for taking the time for joining us here on Locked On Syracuse. Our next episode here on the show, we will go over some of the big fall camp battles on Syracuse's defense. So that's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and we'll see you all again soon.